Hi, I'm Ash and welcome to this video, which is looking at one of the hot topics in board design recently. I am of course talking about the new hollow boards. Naish had two of these for demo at their dealer meeting. One was the Odyssey NVision, which is a very slim downwind style board aimed at downwind riding or possibly parawing. The other is the Chimera NVision, that is the board featured in this video. Naish have already announced their line of Chimera boards earlier this year. The NVision is the hollow version of the Chimera, most noticeably by its yellow colour, which I believe will feature on a lot of Naish performance orientated products. The board on test here is the 88 litre variant. This board is 6 foot 3 inches by 21.2 inches and is 5.3 inches thick. The board shape, width, rocker and overall styling on these boards gives me the feeling that they were designed for getting you up on foil as early as possible without being so thin that they become problematic to balance. Certainly 6 foot 3 inches is fairly long for a 90 litre board, and the 21.2 inch width will definitely lend itself to gathering speed quickly. The boards have a fairly long and continuous rocker line, which will lend itself well to performance in surf. Speaking of which, we have a fairly pointed surf style nose. The rails are angled down the entire length of the board and are quite rounded without too many sharp edges, which will be helpful in touchdowns and not create too much directional grabbing when you do touchdown. The deck pad is of a decent depth and provides good protection to the knees as well as a good level of grip for balancing and not sliding off the board. We have foot strap inserts that will support both inline and offset foot positioning, but it does not look like it will support a V-strap. In the deck there is a Gore-Tex automatic air vent for equalising board pressure. Then to the rear of the board we have the bung or plug for sealing the hollow board. This bung can be removed to drain any water from the board should you manage to damage it. It's also recommended that this bung be removed if the board is left in hot sun or experiences large temperature changes so that the air can equalise more easily and not build pressure in the board. For example, if you're travelling with the board on an airline, then taking the bung out would be a good idea. The board is only 5 inches thick, which again lends itself to a reasonable foil feel without too much board between the feet and the top of the mast. The layup in these boards is very interesting as they are thicker skinned than a foam construction board, but also stiffer due to the hollow construction and how it is achieved with the makeup of the internals of the board and the way it is sectioned in order to give it strength. Lastly, without the internal foam we do end up with a very light board, lighter than you would achieve with foam construction. The 88 litre coming in at around 4.5 kilos, bearing in mind that that is with a fairly long foil track and full foot strap inserts. From a technical perspective, the board features a full carbon layup and an integrated stringer system which joins the top and bottom deck, Gore-Tex air vent and a toolless drain plug. The board is quite flat. If there was any scalloping of the deck, I didn't really notice it. So what we effectively have here is a very light, very stiff board with good dimensions for getting it up onto foil quickly, and it fits squarely in that kind of longer mid-length kind of area of board design. So let's put it on the water and see if any of this technical talk actually turns into reality. Unlike other reviews where I generally get to ride a board for multiple sessions, different conditions and wind strengths, for this review I was at the Naish dealer meeting, and I'm not a dealer, I was just invited to review and test stuff. And this meant I got a lot less time with the product, so I'm going to call this a mini review because I didn't get as much time as I would have normally have liked to fully review a product in all conditions. The first thing that I was intrigued about was how would a hollow board float? Would it be corky like inflatable boards or more like a traditional foam core hard board? Well, the answer to this was it was not like either of these. But if I was to say it was like anything, then it would definitely be more towards a traditional hard board. It is different though, it almost has an unnatural balance feeling. It's very hard to explain. I can only say that I really liked it and it was really very predictable and easy to balance and not in the least bit corky at all. So completely unlike an inflatable board, much more like a hard board, but in some respects nicer than a hard board. Now, before riding the 88 litre Chimera NVision, I deliberately rode the standard foam core 88 litre Chimera so I could feel the differences back to back. If we put to one side the nice balanced way the board floats, once you are on your feet it feels very much like the foam core board. That is until you pump your wing, and then it comes up onto foil much more quickly than the standard board. This did really surprise me. It was really easy to pump this board onto foil in comparison to the standard model. It's not that it accelerates faster or is easier to pump, it just lifts much earlier. Once up on foil there is a reassuring directness to the board. I have to say here that once you're on foil you are primarily surfing the foil through the medium of the board. This of course is where board weight and stiffness becomes the significant factor, and I have to say I really liked how this board felt. Super direct, very little swing weight, reactive yet predictable. It was very much like riding a board that feels in sync with what you want to do or achieve, rather than how boards feel as they get heavier and progressively less in sync with your intentions. This is all of course down to the dreaded swing weight, but these boards are so light you barely notice any swing weight at all. It just goes where you point it, and happily. You can also feel the stiffness in the board, and that translates directly into your inputs to the foil. It is a reassuringly positive experience riding a light, stiff, reactive board where the board goes exactly where you direct the foil immediately without delay. Now I don't often ride strapless, but the Chimera NVision was the first board I rode that weekend where without having some straps didn't bother me that much. This was down to the reactiveness and responsiveness of the Chimera NVision to my desired direction changes, where I wasn't having to rely on a bit of pulling the straps to get it to go where I wanted it. I understand the footage you are watching now has some level of repetitiveness to it, but I wanted to share the whole flight on this board. I'm doing many of the same moves because I'm slowly dialing in how the board reacts and modifying how I am driving the board in order to get the best out of it. You will note that each progressive tack gets a bit cleaner, and this is just me dialing in my feel on the board by repeating maneuvers. Now when it comes to boards there are a huge number of things to say, but they broadly come down to the following. 1. Is it easy to balance, and is the deck pad soft and grippy? 2. Does it get on foil easily? 3. Does it rail track when getting onto foil? 4. Is it light, stiff and responsive on foil? 5. Does it touch down well without grabbing in or rail tracking? And 6. Does it go where you point it, and how much swing weight is there? Covering those off respectively, then for 1, is it easy to balance, and is the deck pad soft and grippy? Well yes, it's exceptionally easy to balance, and the hollow board has a unique and quite nice feel to how they float. For 2, does it get on foil easily? Well yes, it pumps up more quickly than the equivalent traditional foam core board. 3, does it rail track when getting onto foil? And the answer to that is yes, it does rail track a little. This becomes more apparent with length, and the Chimera is a longer, narrower style board, so you would expect that there would be a little bit of rail tracking. 4, is it light and stiff and responsive on foil? And this is where it really shone. 100% very light, stiff and responsive, almost uncannily intuitive to ride is perhaps how I would explain it. 5, does it touch down well without grabbing in or rail tracking? Well yes, again this was quite good. The touchdowns across the weekend on all the Chimeras were pretty undramatic, and I didn't really have many situations where I got dragged in by a rail. They do happen very occasionally, but nothing to worry about. And 6, does it go where you point it, and how much swing weight is there? Well again here 10 out of 10. The attraction of these boards is no doubt weight, and when you ditch weight you immediately get better performance. The other thing I would mention is the nose on the Chimera is not bulbous or carrying a little extra volume, like many boards these days which have a little bit more volume up front, and the effect of this is it means that you only have to balance the board on the roll axis, because on the pitch axis you never really sink the nose because there's a bit more volume up front, so you only really sink the tail. So you only end up really thinking about the roll axis and whether you're going to fall in backwards or fall in forwards. Because the Chimera doesn't have that extra volume in the nose particularly, you can actually put too much weight on the front of the board, both when you're kneeling and also when you're standing up and trying to pump onto foil. And so there is some possibility to sink the nose on the Chimera unintentionally when trying to balance or when trying to get up onto foil. So that would be one of the few negatives that I had when riding this board. The elephant in the room here is of course jumping. Naish do not warrant the board for jumping, so I guess we should take note that these hollow boards are therefore not for jumping. At least that's the official line. Unofficially, I know that both Naish and Duotone, who also have hollow boards, have been jumping their hollow boards to test if they hold up, and the results have been good. Just don't take that as advice from me that you can jump them, because if you do and they break, then that is on you and your now lack of warranty. Now in this footage you'll see that I of course did not jump the board, not least because I didn't have any straps on it, and if there had been straps on it I might have gone for a small cheeky jump just to see, but there were no straps, so unfortunately you aren't going to see any footage of that. So the real question here is, do hollow boards deliver what they claim? And in my experience riding the Naish Chimera NVision, they absolutely do. I think the issue for some will be the lack of jumping ability, although that will be a small subset of people. The more credible argument as to whether one of these is on your wish list is down to cost. These are not cheap boards. There's quite a premium to pay for that hollow construction. Only you can tell if that extra cost is something that you are prepared to swallow. For me, I would absolutely take a hollow board in a heartbeat. They ride fantastically well, but it would likely be for my parawing journey rather than my wing journey, because I do jump when winging, but not when parawinging. So let's get into some pros and cons. The pros are that it's lightweight, it has a better or easier pump onto foil than the equivalent foam core board, it has more reactiveness when it is on foil than the foam core board, it's stiffer than the foam core board, and when you're on your knees looking to stand your feet, I actually found it was easier to balance as well than the foam core board. The cons are that you can't jump it, and the price. These are going to be quite significantly more expensive than a foam core board. And then there is some minor rail tracking during pump onto foil due to the length, not too much but a little, and because there isn't any extra volume in the nose to stop the nose from diving, there is the possibility that you can nose dive when pumping onto foil and come off the front of the board. So who's this board for? Well, it's obviously not for freestylers, because if you jump this and you damage your board, then Naish are not going to warranty it. So I mean, I can't stress this point more. If you're into jumping, just don't go near one of these boards, because you could find yourself in a whole heap of trouble. But if you're an intermediate or expert foiler that doesn't jump and you're looking for a light, stiff performance board for free ride, or indeed for parawing, then this should be squarely on your wish list, providing you're prepared to pay the premium for it. I of course would like to thank Alex from Naish UK for inviting me to the dealer meeting, and if you want to know more about that, then I have a video on my channel explaining the invite to me as an independent reviewer and how this all came about. Okay, I just want to add at the end here that this is going to seem like I didn't spend very long on the Chimera NVision, and one thing to bear in mind is that I'd been riding the Chimera foam board and other sizes of the Chimera for 2 entire days prior to this ride on the NVision, so I was already very familiar with how the Chimera rides, and I only really needed to ride the NVision to determine what the differences are rather than how a Chimera rides in general. I'm going to leave the rest of this footage to play out, so you'll see the entirety of the sailing that I did on the Chimera NVision, and I'll see you on the next video.